Well, today we're going to be talking primarily about boron. I'm Jim Daly from Daly Manufacturing, and we're just now making boron to actually uh, put into our line as a standalone mineral. There are quite a few minerals, but we haven't had boron, and that's going to be a new one for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I want to mention another new product that we're getting as well. It's called uh, Akkermansia muciniphila. Now, this is a probiotic, but it's kind of a unique one. It doesn't uh, work quite like most probiotics. It's very specific in its function. Along the intestinal tract, there's a mucus lining that is really critical for maintaining a healthy gut wall and not getting leaky gut syndrome or other problems that can come up. It protects the gut wall and it traps a lot of things that might get through that shouldn't. Now, this is being constantly replenished, as are the cells in the gut wall. Um, so what happens is the mucus lining is constantly being broken down and eaten. Actually, that's its prebiotic food by the Akkermansia bacteria. That keeps a healthy mucus there because the new mucus that comes out is more is fresher and better and works better. So mucus starts breaking down and is not functional after a day or so. So this is a particular bacteria that's really important for keeping the cell wall mucus lining intact and healthy. Now, it's kind of tricky with this bacteria because although most people don't get enough of it or short on it, it's been killed off with um, antibiotics or foods components that are bad for it. Some people actually have an overgrowth of it, and that's also bad because it eats up too much of the mucus, and then that causes its own problems. So I don't like real high doses of that particular bacteria. In fact, I don't like real high doses of most probiotic bacteria because really what you need is a balance and a well balance between the different ones. And there's a lot of bacteria that we can't even get as probiotics because they've never been able to grow it in a culture and make it and sell it. So these things need to be kept in balance and not something that you just take a whole bunch of, and the more the better. So we have a not a real high potency one, but what it will do, we put it in an acid resistant capsule so that it'll actually get to the intestinal tract before being killed by acids in the stomach. So it will get there, but it won't be a real high dose. So you're not going to overdose yourself and mess up with that on this product unless you just really swallowed handfuls of pills. On the other hand, what it does is provide kind of like a starter, a seed starter, uh, to make more of it in the gut. So it will allow your body to work on helping to establish a good uh, bacterial load in there to make a healthy gut lining. So that's something that's coming up. Um, Probably be October, early October before we have it, I think. It might be sooner, but I say sometime in the first part of October, probably. The boron that we're talking about now, it should be coming up pretty quickly. So hopefully at least by next week, but I'm not quite sure on that. If anybody else knows more about where we are on that product, you can chime in and say and tell me, but I think everything's here for it and it should be ready to go pretty soon. So what is boron? Well, it's a chemical element. You can see to the left there on that little picture, the picture of the periodic table, the boron part of it. It's a very um, small element with atomic number of 5. So it's really down there. In its crystalline state, it's a dark, lustrous metalloid, and in its amorphous state, it's a brown powder. And so a metalloid is basically an element that has both characteristics of a metal and non-metal. And it kind of fits, doesn't fit either category perfectly, but fits both of them pretty well. The only lighter element that's really something that's used in supplements is lithium, which isn't often used in supplements, but it is at times. It has an atomic number of 3, so that's even smaller. So these are elements that are kind of rare. Um, they're not found commonly in the Earth's crust. They're fairly rare elements, but there are areas where they're quite plentiful. Now, I don't know how many of you can remember back to the TV series Death Valley Days. It was sponsored by the Pacific Coast Borax Company, and one of the longest running Westerns, actually. They had kind of a unique um, way of doing it. They had a um, person who was kind of like a host that explained the story. And they usually had stories that were actually based on true events that happened in the Old West and in most of the time in the area where borax was mined. And happens to be in North America. Death Valley has these like dried up riverbeds that are borax. And the actor Ronald Reagan was host from 1966 to 1969 until in 1969 he decided to leave the show and run for governor of California. And of course, I think most of you would agree that he went on to have a pretty good political career. Actually, he probably was more successful as a politician than as a actor, although he did have good acting roles and he was an accomplished actor as well. But you can still buy the 20 mule team borax. It's described, you can see here, this is from a Death Valley Museum now, the picture on the right of the old borax wagons that they would, well, the old wagons they would use to haul borax out of Death Valley. And they would hook up literally teams of 20 mules to pull it out. That must have been hard on those mules to work in Death Valley and pull those things. But that's one of the major sources, one of the element boron. There's a few other boron salts and things as well, but borax is one of the major ones. And they just basically scoop it up off the floor and try to clean it up a little bit. Some people have taken borax as a supplement for boron. You're putting yourself out there a little bit to do that because it's really not, cleaned up and made quite for human consumption. This has been used as a cleaner. It's more of an industrial use. It's been used in, it's actually a pesticide to kill ants and roaches. Eating borax, I guess, is for whatever reason toxic to them, more so than to people. And here you can see borax throughout the world where there are places where it's mined. And on the far upper left there, it says Fort Caddy and Series Lake Boron. Anyway, that's Death Valley area of the Western United States. There's a little bit down in Mexico there. Some major deposits in South America, some in the Middle East, and China has quite a bit actually. So there are boron deposits around the world, but they're not real common. There's not lots of them. Now, you'll notice down there in the bottom, Australia and all that area really doesn't have any, or at least no major amounts of it. Now, there will be traces of borax or boron in the soils. Some places have more than others. And usually, if you get boron, you get it from plants grown in boron-rich soil. So that's always kind of a major question. Most people don't know how much boron is in their soil, or in the foods that they get from the grocery store. So boron deficiency, although we don't know really how to define that yet, but most people would say intakes of less than 1 milligram a day seem to be fairly common. Now, up until fairly recently, boron was not considered to be needed in human nutrition at all. It was, an industrial chemical, the borax was, and pesticide, and not something that you would want to eat, according to most, quote, experts. However, Dr. Rex Newnham was an Australian, actually born in New Zealand, but then went to Australia. He was an agriculture professor and epidemiologist. He did research on environmental effects on the incidence of arthritis in regions with low, high incidences of arthritis and ones with high. And what's the difference? Is there something that causes people to have more arthritis, in the soils or whatever? Well, he observed that when he moved from one location to another, he moved from an area that was basically mineral-rich soil to one that was a mineral-poor soil. And he, not too long after moving, developed arthritis. And he wondered if there was a connection there. He didn't find many. He looked at all the major minerals and what they were, and he just couldn't come up with a connection. But he narrowed it down to possibly boron. And he was curious about that. Is it possible that boron deficiency could be responsible for his arthritis? And so he decided to test it. And this is a kind of a review of mostly of what he did, but I'll just read to you the introduction to this. It's kind of an interesting story. In 1963, I hypothesized that the lack of dietary boron would enhance the occurrence and severity of some forms of arthritis, or that boron supplementation could alleviate arthritic condition in animals and humans. This hypothesis was a result of the alleviation of my own arthritic pain, swelling, and stiffness by boron supplementation, 60 milligrams of boron per day, as sodium tetraborate. Shortly thereafter, other people with arthritis were convinced to try boron supplementation. Many had arthritic symptoms alleviated. Between 1976 and 1981, 90,000 bottles of elemental boron, 100 tablets containing 3 milligrams, called Borex, were sold without advertising. Just word of mouth recommendations of satisfied customers was all that was necessary. After receiving hundreds of positive comments from others who had tried boron supplementation, I presented my experiences and successes to the Australian and New Zealand Association for the Advancement of Science in Auckland, New Zealand in 1979, and at the International Symposium of Trace Elements in Man and Animals held in Perth, Australia. In the TEMA paper, I presented data that showed that arthritic femur heads contain half the boron content of healthy femur heads. Subsequently, similar findings were obtained by Havercroft and Ward. They found lower boron concentrations in bones and synovial fluid from people with rheumatoid arthritis than from those without this disorder. In 1981, Australia instituted a regulation that declared boron and its compounds were poisoned at any concentration. This regulation effectively stopped the sale of boron supplements in Australia. This action impelled me to obtain scientific evidence for the dietary need for boron. My first research efforts were directed toward establishing an epidemiologic relationship between arthritis and low boron exposure. The results of this research have been published. The findings suggested that in areas of the world where boron intakes usually were 1 milligram or less, the estimated incidence of arthritis ranged from 20 to 70%. On the other hand, in areas of the world where boron intakes were usually 3 to 10 milligrams, the estimated incidence of arthritis ranged from 0 to 10%. While the epidemiologic evidence was accumulating, other findings appeared that support the concept that boron is beneficial to bone health. Some of these were recently reviewed. They include the observations of surgeons that bones of patients who use boron supplements are much harder to cut than bones of patients who do not use supplements. The clinical observation that boron supplements apparently accelerates the healing of broken bones and that rats given an arthritic adjuvant develop less inflammation and arthritis when administered boron either orally or intraperitoneally. It also has been reported recently that boron alone and in combination with garlic oil showed anti-arthritic activity against formaldehyde-induced arthritis in rats. So there's it was an interesting story. He really had trouble in Australia. He never got it accepted there, to the best of my knowledge. There was a lot of pushback on it. People there again thought of boron as an industrial chemical and pesticide, and the idea that people should take it for arthritis really was a hard sell. And the other thing that was a problem with him is that he was marketing as a cure for arthritis. And, you get in trouble in this country too for doing that if it's not gone through a drug approval process. So, he did have problems with that. But nevertheless, he was really the person that got the ball rolling on boron research and its needs. And it eventually has become accepted that boron has a role in human nutrition. It's not accepted that boron is a cure for arthritis. So, it may or may not be. But, he has a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that it is. He doesn't have a whole lot of really good clinical trial data, and it still doesn't exist to a great degree, but the boron research is slowly progressing. It's still not researched a lot compared to most minerals, but the research is gradually accumulating. Now, this is a recent article on boron and fairly recent, and mineralization of bones. And it reports that boron may interact with steroid hormones in the prevention of demineralization and bone loss. Boron supplementation does reduce urinary excretion of calcium and magnesium in perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. boron can compensate, at least to some degree, for vitamin D deficiency and kind of make up for it, at least in the realm of bone health. The study here found that boron upregulated the expressions of osteoblast associated proteins to make new bones. Now, for those who may not know the terminology here, there are two types of bone cells, osteoblast and osteoclast. Osteoblast cells make new bone mineralization. They lay down the bone. Osteoclast sort of demineralizes and takes out the old bone. So it's sort of like those intestinal cells that and I'm used to we were talking about. It's constantly being replenished and removed. The study concluded that the results of the study suggest that at the molecular level, boron displays important roles on bone metabolism and may find novel uses at the regenerative medicine. Not good English, really, but you kind of get the message. One thing I've observed is you see in a lot of fairly major journals nowadays pretty poor English, so I'm not sure how well they're being, the editors are doing at cleaning up English, but that's another topic. Since I'm an editor of a journal, I kind of pay attention to those things, I guess. Forrest Nielsen is an interesting guy who I've met. He grew up on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin. He got his BS and MS and PhD degrees from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and has published numerous books and research articles on trace elements, including boron. And he certainly supports the use, the notion that boron is important for human health. No question about it. And I met him just this 2 months ago in Chicago at the American Society for Nutrition meeting. And he's a nice guy. He's not getting around too well now. He kind of walks with a walker a lot, but he's still active actually, and still going to meetings and doing a little bit of research. He's a sort of a semi-retired emeritus professor. But he is a person who has really looked at trace elements throughout his career and identified uses for a surprisingly amount of them, even lead to some degree. He fed rats on a lead-free diet and they did fine. However, subsequent generations did not do it, and well, on the total lead-free diet. So there seems to be a need for even a little tiny bit of lead. Actually, I wish I'd asked him when I was talking to him if he thought that there were any elements that there wasn't some need for in human nutrition. It seems like the body's found a way of utilizing almost everything in one way or another, which isn't surprising. The body's pretty good at figuring those things out. But he's a great guy, and he's done a lot of wonderful research on trace elements. And if you ever have questions about one, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, look up some of his books or articles, because he's published a lot on that. Here we see a little article. It's a review article, Nothing Boring About Boron. And I'll just sort of go down the list of things that they say boron may be able to do. And I can't really confirm all of this yet. It would take a lot of study that I haven't done yet to do it. But it's something I probably need to get to. But they list essential for growth and maintenance of bone, and that's one we knew. Greatly improves wound healing, and that's interesting. Has beneficial effects on estrogen and testosterone, basically your steroid hormones. And that sort of goes hand in hand with the bone, actually, because those are important for bone health as well. And that may be one of the mechanisms by which it helps with bone health. It boosts magnesium absorption, reduces inflammatory markers, protects against pesticide-induced oxidative stress, improves brain electrical activity and cognition, influences the formation of key biomolecules, SAMe being one of them, acetylmethionine. Has anti-cancer effects, therapeutic and preventive, against at least a few cancers, and protects against chemotherapy side effects. Now, the real weakness in boron research is the mechanism, how it does it, because that has not been well characterized. There's one study I found that sort of felt like in some cells at least, it was important structurally to maintain the integrity of the cell wall. Uh, you know, but the precise mechanisms of how boron works is not well established yet. It does seem to work in a lot of ways similar to calcium in the body, but there's a lot we don't know about boron. There's a lot of research that needs to be done, but we can say that there are a lot of systems in the body that seem to be affected by boron, and it is important to them. So in conclusion here, boron is not considered to be important in human nutrition by a lot of people, but that is rapidly changing. That was kind of yesterday's idea. Now it's becoming more important. However, there's still no recommended daily allowance. They don't really know for sure where the sweet spot is. There's 1 milligram that was used in some of the epidemiological studies per day, or do you really need more than that to get the maximum benefits? And we're not quite sure yet. Based on studies of people have used different doses of it, they have really decided that at least 20 milligrams per day is safe for adults, and that's where they put the safe upper limit. Interesting thing about boron is that it's very well absorbed, normally in the range of 80 to 90% absorbed. One study actually measured giving boron, and then most of it actually eventually came out in the urine, about 80% of it, and some of it probably stayed around. So it's got a very high absorption rate. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing. It would indicate a lack of regulation of absorption. With most minerals, there's active transport, and when you get enough of it, it kind of shuts down and it's hard to get it through. Well, boron, there's no gates to keep it out. If you take too much, you get too much. So there's not a safety net there. And it's not a perfect safety net for other minerals, but a lot better one than for boron. So you want to be careful when people start wanting to take very big doses of it, because we don't know the consequences of that, but we do know that it's going to be well absorbed. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing will depend on how much they're taking. I've not seen any information showing any benefits of intakes greater than 6 milligrams. And that may change, but that's about the high limit I've seen people taking and getting benefits from it. And 3 milligrams seems adequate for most people. So if I were asked to set a RDA for it or whatever, I'd probably say 3 milligrams a day. But if you're wanting to take it therapeutically, 6 milligrams is fine. There's no problem there. But that's kind of where I am on dosages. Now, the tablets we're making are 6 milligrams, but they have a slotted tablet and you can break them in half and take 3 milligrams. So you can, it's going to be a bottle of 120. So you could take 6 milligrams a day for 120 days, or you could break them in half and take 3 milligrams for 240 days. You know, it's not going to be a very expensive supplement to use doing it that way. As we mentioned before, the mechanism of how boron works in the body, mechanisms are not well described, and it's still not researched as much as most minerals. And I'd really love to see more research done on boron because it seems to have some pretty interesting properties and some substantial benefits for people. And the lack of research is not a good thing because we really there's just a lot we don't know and can't say for sure about it. So with that, I'll stop and we'll open up for questions if anybody has any. Any questions out there or comments? Well, if there's no questions and no comments, I think we'll sign off and hope you all have a good day, rest of your day. And we'll see you next month. And I'll probably be talking about the Akkermansia next month. And we may be a week later next month because some of the people are going to be gone. But we'll worry about that then. So you all have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.